Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine facing down a powerful, shadowy adversary one that throws everything it has at you. Temptation, distraction, even outright obstruction.
Right.
But instead of being defeated, these encounters become moments of profound revelation, not just for you, but for everyone watching.
That's exactly the kind of fascinating dynamic we're exploring today. We're diving into some really rich stories, or vathu, as they're called, from the commentary on the Dhammapada.
Okay.
These specific accounts detail pivotal run-ins between the Buddha and the figure known as Māra, often understood as, well, the personification of negative forces, hindrances, even death itself, the things that keep us bound.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack these narratives. We want to understand Mara's playbook, the different ways he tries to derail the path, and then really see the incredible inner strength and wisdom the Buddha demonstrates in meeting these challenges.
Exactly. And here's the crucial part. How the Buddha's perfect equanimity, his mastery in these moments, ended up being the very catalyst for powerful spiritual breakthroughs for other people. It wasn't just about him.
That's key. And we should remember, these events take place after the Buddha's enlightenment, right?
Yes, that's important. He's already awakened, already sort of beyond the ordinary reach of these forces, which makes his responses particularly illuminating for us.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our source material gives us two main stories. The first one is often called the story of Mara's daughters. We learn that the Buddha originally spoke a profound teaching about he whose victory is not defeated, right there at the Bodhi tree, and the source tells us this discourse was prompted because of Mara's daughters.
And what's really interesting is that the same teaching was later repeated in a place called the Kuru country, not just generally, but specifically for a particular listener, a Brahmin named Magandiya.
Ah, yes, Magandiya the Brahmin. Now, this Brahmin had a daughter, also named Magandiya, who was described as exceptionally beautiful.
Very beautiful, yes.
Our source paints a picture of a father with, well, high worldly ambitions for his daughter. He was rejecting high-status suitors, Brahmins, princes, Hatyas, because he just didn't feel they were good enough for her. Very protective, maybe.
Or perhaps just very ambitious for her status.
Yeah.
But the Buddha saw something different entirely. Looking with his net of knowledge, he perceived that Magandiya the Brahmin and his wife had deep spiritual potential.
Oh, both of them.
Both of them. Specifically, the potential for realizing what are called the three paths and fruits. This refers to significant stages of spiritual awakening, leading towards liberation. So he saw past the father's worldly focus to their deeper capacity.
Right. So the scene is set. One morning, the Buddha is on his alms round near the Brahmin's village. The Brahmin himself is outside doing a fire ritual.
A common practice.
He sees the Buddha approaching, is struck by his appearance, and instantly his worldly filter kicks in. He thinks, this is it. This is the man suitable for my daughter.
He approached the Buddha right there and then, offered him his daughter, saying he hadn't found anyone worthy until now, but the Buddha was suitable. He offered her, quite literally, as a handmaid.
Wow. Okay. And the Buddha's reaction, what did he do?
The source says he gave a very measured, completely neutral response.
Yeah.
He neither accepted nor rejected the offer. Just stillness.
Interesting.
Right. So the Brahmin, clearly excited, rushes home, tells his wife, gets his daughter all dressed up, and they head back to the spot, drawing a crowd of curious villagers along the way. People wanted to see what was happening.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting and where the first powerful insight emerges, I think. The Buddha had stood where the Brahmin indicated, but then, deliberately, the source tells us, he willed a footprint to appear there.
Because Buddha's footprints only appear where they are willed. That's what the text says.
Right, and then he simply moved to another spot nearby.
So the Brahmin, arriving back with his wife and daughter, points to the spot where the Buddha had first stood and shows his wife the footprint, confidently declaring, "See, that's his footprint."
But the wife, she had a different kind of sight, didn't she? She was skilled in omens and divination.
Exactly. She took one look and knew instantly. She told her husband, quite pointedly, "This is not the footprint of someone who indulges in sensual pleasures." Or, kamabhujinopadam.
And she used an analogy.
A fantastic one. She told him he was seeing a crocodile in a water jar. Udakatimi susumarapesasi. Basically, you're seeing something dangerous and worldly, where there's actually something pure. You're completely misinterpreting this.
What a put down.
Oh, it was insightful. She then used verses to explain. She vividly contrasted the footprints, the visible traces of someone's inner state, you see, left by those driven by lust, hatred, and delusion with the Buddha's print. She described his footprint as belonging to someone without defilements, Nikila Sasevapade, someone with the covering of defilements removed. Vivachidasa Idamadisapade. It's not about a physical mark on the ground, it's a powerful metaphor.
So it's about the inner reality.
Exactly. His inner state of freedom was so profound it left a different kind of trace, one only someone with sensitive insight could perceive. This immediately tells us the story isn't about external appearances, it's about internal reality.
Incredible. But despite his wife's, well, incredible, insightful warning, the Brahmin completely missed it.
Completely. He insisted they continue. They found the Buddha nearby, and the Brahmin again offered his daughter. Just went right ahead.
And this time?
This time, the Buddha gave a much longer, more direct response, using the opportunity to teach. He recounted his own spiritual journey, starting right from his great renunciation, leaving the palace, his family, on his horse, Kantaka, with Channa.
And right at the city gate, didn't Māra show up then?
Yes. Māra made his first move, his initial challenge. He appeared and tempted the Buddha, offering him universal kingship in just 7 days if he would only turn back. Worldly power.
But the Buddha wasn't interested.
Absolutely not. His reply was clear. He knew about the potential for kingship, sure, but his goal wasn't worldly power. He stated his aim was omniscience. Sabanyutanyataya supreme, perfect knowledge.
Māra must have backed off then.
Not a chance. He then issued a threat, saying that if the Buddha entertained even a single sensual thought, Dhammapadaṭṭhakathā, from that day forward, Māra would know exactly how to get to him.
Wow.
And the source emphasizes Māra's incredible persistence. It says he followed the Buddha for 7 years. Sattavasani, constantly looking for a weakness, any crack in his resolve, and a tarta pikopi.
7 years. That's dedication in a way.
Of a sort. The Buddha, of course, continued on his path. He famously spent 6 years engaged in difficult practices. Kabasani dukkarakkara.
The austerities.
Exactly. Ultimately, relying on his own effort and insight, he attained full omniscience at the Bodhi tree, Bodhimula Savanyutanyan Padivita.
And
then, for weeks, he sat experiencing the profound bliss of liberation, Vimuttisukhai. The source describes him doing this while sitting at the Ajapala banyan tree during the 5th week, Panyakami Sataye, after enlightenment, just absorbing that state.
So at this point, Māra must have realized it was hopeless.
Utterly defeated. The source says he was despondent dominasapato, recognizing that the Buddha was now completely beyond his reach. Atikantodani esamama visaya. His power couldn't touch him.
But then his daughters get involved.
And this is where Māra's 3 daughters step in, representing the very forces Māra embodies. Tana, meaning craving, arati, discontent or aversion, and raga, sensual lust.
The core defilements, really.
Pretty much. Seeing their father's sadness, they asked him why. He explained about the Buddha escaping his grasp.
And they thought they could succeed where he failed.
They were confident. As women Ithionama, the text notes, they offered to bring the Buddha under their power, using what the source calls lustful snares, raga pasadehi banditva. They approached him, making the traditional gesture of offering service, saying they would serve his feet. Parete samadapadakarema.
How did the Buddha react to this direct temptation?
He gave them absolutely no attention. The source is very specific. He didn't pay attention to their words, not tasvavakana manasakasi, and didn't even open his eyes to look nakani umalitva olakesi. He simply wasn't registering them on that level.
Total non-reaction.
Well,
so what did they do? Give up?
Oh no, they escalated. They completely switched tactics. They observed correctly that men have diverse desires, ukavaoko porisani atipayo, for women of different ages. Young girls, young women, middle-aged, old. So to really try and tempt this Buddha, they decided they would manifest in various ways, not a pakarki covering every possible preference.
They shape-shift.
Essentially, yes, and they went all out. Each of the 3 daughters created hundreds, satasara, of different forms, appearing as young girls, unmarried women, women married once, twice, middle-aged women, even old women. A whole spectrum.
Wow, that's elaborate.
It is. They presented themselves in this dazzling, varied display and approached the Buddha like this 6 times in total chakatu, each time offering to serve his feet.
And surely that got a reaction.
Still nothing. The Buddha's reaction remained exactly the same. The source reiterates, he still gave them no mind, explaining that he was freed in the unsurpassed cessation of substratum of rebirth. Anutare upetasakai adimujo. He was just dwelling in a different reality, fundamentally.
So when did he finally speak to them?
It was only then, after all these attempts, that the Buddha finally addressed them directly. He told them to leave, asking why they were even bothering with these attempts. pointless, really. He stated plainly that such efforts could only be effective on those not free from lust, Ābhassara, but the Tathagata, the Buddha, had abandoned lust and other defilements, Ragarabhakkhina.
So he basically said, your tools don't work on me.
Precisely. He posed the rhetorical question. By what reason could they possibly expect to bring him under their power? Atano Visanasata. It was impossible.
And he spoke some verses then, too.
Yes, powerful verses that cut right to the heart of his liberation. He said, essentially, he whose victory is not defeated cannot be led by any track. Yasachitana Vajati, Apadakanapadiranasatha.
A track. Yeah.
And also, he for whom craving cannot be led anywhere, cannot be led by any track. Yasajalini Visatakikatanta Natikuhinchinatave. Apadakantapadanasatha. The source explains that track here, padai, means things like the track of lust, anger, or delusion, the pathways our defilements create that Māra tries to use. But the Buddha had erased those tracks within himself. There was no path for them to follow.
No foothold.
Exactly, no foothold. And what's incredible is the immediate effect of this specific teaching moment.
What happened?
The source says that at the end of this discourse, which arose directly from the challenge by Māra's daughters, many deities, Bahunadevatana, who were present, attained a profound understanding of the Dhammadhammavisamayo, reaching various stages of awakening.
Wow, so his resistance became a teaching for others.
Instantly. And Māra's daughters, their power nullified, simply disappeared, vanished.
Okay, so let's loop back to Māgandiya the Brahmin and his beautiful daughter, still waiting nearby through all this, presumably.
Yes. The Buddha then turned his attention back to the Brahmin, and the teaching continued, again prompted by the challenge, but now tailored for him.
Right.
And here, the Buddha made a really striking, almost, well, shocking comparison. He contrasted the bodies of Māra's daughters, which he had just seen in their tempting forms. He described them as being like a mass of gold. Suvakanta sadisana atabhavana. Outwardly perfect, not bound by phlegm, etc. Samhadhyaya pali buddhina. Outwardly flawless. And he stated clearly that even then, seeing that kind of perfection, he had no desire for sexual intercourse. Zero interest.
But then he turned to Māgandiya's daughter, standing there with her father.
Yes, and he described her body using a very different lens, as full of the 32 impure parts, hair, teeth, skin, blood, internal organs, the standard list, like a pot of impurity decorated outside asuchigaro behichitovia.
Oof, that's blunt.
Extremely blunt. He used this stark language, not to be cruel, you understand, but to reveal the deeper reality beneath the surface attraction the Brahmin was fixated on.
To break through the delusion.
Exactly. And he emphasized his detachment dramatically. He said that even if his foot were smeared with impurity like mud or filth, and she stood on the threshold, he wouldn't wish to touch her body even with his foot.
Wow.
He reinforced this with a verse, asking rhetorically how he could possibly desire something. Kimivai, full of urine and feces, with Ābhassara stating he wouldn't even wish to touch it with his foot. Padzapi na samfusatuna iketi.
So he's taking the Brahmin's focus on outward physical form and just completely flipping it with this radical, deconstructive perspective.
Precisely. He's using the Brahmin's own fixation to point towards the impermanent, ultimately unattractive nature of the physical form when viewed without the lens of craving and attachment.
And what was the result of this powerful, uncompromising teaching delivered right after the encounter with Māra's daughters and prompted by the Brahmin's, well, worldly offer?
Our source tells us the ultimate effect was profound and liberating. At the end of this discourse, both Māgandiya the Brahmin and his wife attained the fruit of non-returning.
Non-return. What level is that again?
Non-returning is a very high stage of spiritual attainment. It means they had eliminated significant defilements, particularly sensual craving and ill will, to the point where they would no longer be reborn in the human realm or any lower realms. They were bound for final liberation.
So a seemingly negative interaction, Māra's temptation, the Brahmin's misplaced ambition was masterfully turned into a path to profound awakening for them.
Yes. His absolute freedom from desire, demonstrated right there in the face of the ultimate tempters, became the very teaching that freed these two people from the lower cycles of rebirth.
Incredible. His mastery became their liberation.
It really shows the power of a liberated mind to use any situation, even opposition, even temptation, as a means to illuminate the truth for others.
Okay, let's move to our second story then. This also features Māra trying to cause trouble, right? This one's set at Pankasala, a Brahmin village.
That's the one. Our source tells us the Buddha spoke a discourse, starting with the words, "Oh, happily indeed," Susukavattha in this village, specifically concerning Māra.
In the context here, what was happening?
The context here is that the Buddha had seen, again with his insightful knowledge, the potential for a group of 500 girls, Panyakasatana Kumarkana, in that village to attain the path of stream entry, Sotapadhi Magasa.
Stream entry. Remind us what that signifies.
Stream entry is the first irreversible stage of awakening. Once you hit that, you're guaranteed to reach full enlightenment within a maximum of 7 more lifetimes, usually in the human or heavenly realms.
Okay, a big deal.
A huge step. It involves overcoming the first set of fetters that bind us, like belief in a permanent self, doubt about the Buddha's path, clinging to rites and rituals.
Got it. So the Buddha is focused on helping these girls reach this significant milestone. He enters the village for his daily alms round. It happens to be a festival de Nahata.
Right, and these 500 girls are just returning from bathing at the river Nahitwa Nadi, all adorned and dressed up alakatatitat, ready for the festivities. Māra, seeing the Buddha and knowing his intention to teach these girls, decides to step in and obstruct him directly. The source says Māra possessed the bodies of all the villagers. Sakalagamavasina sarir adhimuchitva.
Possessed them, like took control.
Literally took control of them, yes. Specifically so they would refuse to give the Buddha anything, not a single scrap of food. The text says, not even a spoonful of alms food.
Oh.
Kachu bikamatapi. Total refusal.
Wow. That's a direct, almost physical act of obstruction using the whole village. So the Buddha leaves the village with nothing.
An empty washed bowl.
Yeah.
Yathatontan patina. Completely empty.
And Mara's just waiting for him, I bet.
Right at the village gate. Māra intercepts him and mockingly asks, well, did you get any alms?
How did the Buddha respond to that?
He replied directly, calling him evil one, Papima, and asked him straight up, why did you do that?
Did Māra admit it?
Oh, yeah. And he revealed his petty, cunning plan. He invited the Buddha to go back into the village again. Māra thought that if the Buddha did go back in, Māra would possess everyone again, then publicly clap his hands, Pachipaharitva, right in front of the Buddha, and laugh and mock him, Hasanakate Karisamiti, for everyone to see. His aim was public humiliation, pure spite.
That's incredibly mean-spirited, just trying to shame him.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is the timing. Just like in the first story, it's perfect.
Yeah.
At that very moment, Tazmi Khan, as the Buddha and Māra are having this exchange at the gate.
Let me guess, the girls arrive.
Those 500 girls reached the village gate. They saw the Buddha, paid their respects by bowing, and stood aside respectfully. They witnessed this whole interaction.
Okay, so Māra sees them too. What does he do now?
Māra, perhaps changing tack slightly or just pressing his perceived advantage, then asked the Buddha if he was afflicted by the pain of hunger. Shikacha dukkha from not getting any food. He's trying to probe for suffering, for discomfort, for some sign the obstruction worked.
Trying to find a crack. And the Buddha's response here, this is where the happily indeed part comes in.
This is it. His response is profoundly insightful and gets right to the heart of spiritual well-being. He replies, today, O evil one, having received nothing, we shall pass the time solely with the bliss of rapture, just like the Ābhassara gods. Ajamaya papima kinchiala vitapapi Ābhassara davaloke brahmanovia pitisukaniva vitina mes sama.
Wow. Basically saying, your little plan means nothing to my inner state.
Precisely. And then he delivers the core verse, which perfectly encapsulates this. Oh, happily indeed we live, we who have nothing. We shall feed on rapture like the Ābhassara gods, Susuka bata javama, yesanunati kinkana pitifakobhavisama deva Ābhassarayata.
We who have nothing is sananati kinchina. In this context, having just received no food, does it mean literally having no possessions?
No, the source explains the deeper meaning. Having nothing here doesn't primarily mean lacking possessions or food. It means having no hindrances or defilements. Nothing like lust, ill will, worry, restlessness, doubt, those inner obstructions that weigh us down and cause suffering. That's the nothing he means.
Ah, so nothing means freedom from those inner things.
Exactly. And feeding on rapture, Puthiwaka, means living on that profound inner bliss and joy, piti, that comes from being free from those defilements. That's the sustenance. Just like the Ābhassara of the gods, Yatha Ābhassara deva Pithabhakahutva Bitanamenti eva Mayapi Pavisamo beings in a higher heavenly realm, they are said to subsist purely on joy, needing no physical food.
So even though he was physically deprived of nourishment by Mara's actions, the Buddha's true sustenance, his real source of well-being, was this profound inner state of spiritual rapture, completely independent of external circumstances.
Completely untouched by Mara's obstruction. Yeah.
He was demonstrating that true happiness and contentment don't come from getting what you want or avoiding what you don't want in the external world. It's not about the alms bowl being full or empty.
Exactly. They come from cultivating freedom from internal constraints, from the defilements. That's the source of real happiness.
And the immediate direct effect on the audience present, the 500 girls who had just arrived and witnessed this whole exchange, they heard this teaching right.
They heard it directly. The source states clearly that at the end of this discourse, delivered right there at the gate, prompted by Mara's failed obstruction, all 500 girls, Panyakasatapita Kumarakayo, attained the fruit of stream entry. Sutapatifale patihaisu.
Just like that, they reached the first stage of awakening.
Just as the Buddha had foreseen. A seemingly petty act of obstruction by Mara leads directly, immediately, to a powerful teaching that triggers this huge spiritual leap for 500 young women.
It's remarkable how in both these stories, Mara's persistent efforts to distract, tempt, or obstruct the Buddha, representing, the very forces that keep beings like us bound to the cycle of suffering, they completely fail to move the Buddha. He's just unshakable.
Because in both cases, his state of being was unshakable. His profound inner freedom from defilements meant he was totally untouched by Mara's strategies, whether they were the seductive allure of Mara's daughters or the frustrating obstruction of getting no food. It just didn't land.
And crucially, the Buddha didn't just passively resist Mara, like building a wall. He actively used these very challenges, these moments of opposition, as perfect opportunities to teach the Dhamma.
That's such a key point. His responses weren't just personal reactions. They were profound demonstrations of the liberated state itself, illuminating the path for anyone who could hear, who was ready to see.
And the impact on those who were present was immediate and transformative, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The Brahmin and his wife moved from a very worldly view to non-returning, near-total liberation. The 500 girls took that first irreversible step onto the path to enlightenment. The text even mentions many deities benefiting from the teaching against Mara's daughters. Others were directly uplifted and awakened by witnessing the Buddha's absolute mastery over these challenging negative influences.
These stories coming to us from these ancient commentaries, they really drive home a powerful idea. The true battleground and maybe the source of true happiness and freedom isn't ultimately out there fighting Mara, it's within.
It comes from cultivating that inner state of freedom from defilements, from having nothing, in that crucial sense of being free from those inner hindrances, those kiññakanas.
Like that inner freedom is the ultimate defense, isn't it? The ultimate strength, allowing one to live on the bliss of rapture even when external circumstances are difficult or challenging or just plain empty, like that alms bowl.
Completely independent.
So, thinking about us, given that we all face our own versions of Mara in our lives, those internal cravings that whisper promises, the moments of discontent or frustration that arise, the external distractions and obstacles that can feel like deliberate roadblocks sometimes. Where do you tend to seek your nourishment, your happiness?
It's a great question. Are you relying on getting things out there, filling that external bowl? Or can you begin to tap into that inner well-being, that piti?
And how could cultivating that inner freedom, really understanding what it truly means to have nothing in the spiritual sense of being free from hindrances, how could that help you navigate the challenges you inevitably face?
Perhaps recognizing the nature of these defilements, seeing them for what they are, is the essential first step towards experiencing a similar kind of unshakable well-being the Buddha demonstrated. Something definitely worth reflecting on.